The vibrant chaos of Mardi Gras has been a source of pain for Chloe for 12 years, ever since her little brother Noah vanished from her side in the crowd. Her guilt has been a constant shadow, shaping her entire life. That shadow is pierced by a strange phone call. A construction crew renovating an old apartment in the French Quarter has found a child's backpack from that era tucked away inside a wall cavity. Inside is a sketchbook that holds the one clue the police never had. This story explores the weight of guilt and the undying hope of a sister who refused to give up. As we follow Chloe down this unexpected path, I'd love for you to think about what you would do in her shoes and share your thoughts as the story unfolds. For Chloe, the city of New Orleans held its breath for only one season, the one leading up to Mardi Gras. While the rest of the world saw parades, beads, and celebration, she only felt the suffocating humidity of a February afternoon 12 years ago. She was 28 now, an administrative assistant at a Tulane University office, a job defined by its quiet orderliness, a direct response to the single most chaotic moment of her life. She lived in a small apartment far from the French Quarter, never went to parades, and changed the radio station if a brass band started playing. The guilt wasn't a memory. It was a permanent resident in her soul. She'd been 16, distracted by a text message from a boy, and when she looked up from her phone, her 7-year-old brother's hand was no longer in hers. Noah was gone. The sea of people had swallowed him whole. The years that followed were a blur of false leads, police sketches that aged with each passing year, and the slow, painful splintering of her family. Her parents never blamed her out loud, but they didn't have to. The accusation lived in the silence at the dinner table, in the way her mother would look at an empty chair. Chloe took the blame they couldn't bring themselves to give, carrying it every day. The phone call came on a Tuesday. It was a Detective Landry from the NOPD Cold Case Unit. His voice was gravelly, tired, the sound of a man who'd seen too many sad stories. He didn't offer false hope. He said a construction crew was gutting an old apartment on Dumaine Street, a building that had been vacant for at least a decade. Behind a section of drywall in a bedroom closet, they'd found something. A child's Spider-Man backpack. He said the contents seemed to be from around 2012. He asked if Noah had a backpack like that. Chloe's breath caught in her throat. Her heart, which had been beating at a slow, steady rhythm of grief for 12 years, suddenly hammered against her ribs. "Yes," she managed to whisper, her voice cracking. "It was his favorite. It had a keychain on the zipper, a little plastic alligator." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Yeah," Landry said, his professional tone softening just a fraction. "It's here. Can you come down to the station, Chloe?" The drive to the precinct was a dream. The world outside her car window seemed distant, unreal. For the first time in over a decade, there was something other than a dead end. It was a terrifying, brilliant flicker of light in a long, dark tunnel. She didn't know if it would lead to answers or just a more profound kind of pain, but for the first time, it was a direction. Her new goal was simple and absolute. She had to see what was in that backpack. She had to know. At the station, Detective Landry led her to a sterile interview room. He was older than he sounded, with weary eyes that had seen the worst of the city. On the metal table was a clear evidence bag. Inside, caked in a decade's worth of dust and plaster, was the Spider-Man backpack. and dangling from the zipper was the little green alligator keychain. Chloe let out a sob she hadn't realized she was holding in. It was his. After all this time, a piece of him had come back. Landry gave her a moment, then gently pushed a pair of latex gloves toward her. With trembling hands, she put them on. He opened the bag, and she carefully pulled out the contents. A half-eaten bag of stale, gummy dinosaurs, a couple of toy cars, and a sketchbook. Noah had loved to draw. He was good at it, too, with an eye for detail that was unusual for a 7-year-old. She opened the sketchbook. The first few pages were familiar. Drawings of their dog, a wobbly sketch of their parents, a cartoonish superhero. Then she turned to the last page, the final drawing he ever made. Her breath hitched. It wasn't a superhero. It was a man. Or rather, a man in a mask. The mask was incredibly detailed, unlike anything she'd ever seen. It was dark, with a long, beak-like nose, resembling an old plague doctor's mask, but it was far more ornate. Intricate, swirling patterns were etched into its surface, and the eyes were just dark, hollow circles. The figure in the drawing was tall and wore a dark cloak. It wasn't a monster from a kid's imagination. It felt real, like something he had seen. "We found this in the last apartment at the end of the hall," Landry explained, leaning forward. "The building records are a mess, but we think the unit was rented by a man who paid in cash for a year and then just disappeared. He used a fake name." He pointed at the drawing. "You recognize this? Any significance?" Chloe shook her head, her mind racing. "No, but it's not a cheap party mask. Look at the detail. Noah drew what he saw." She looked up at Landry, a new fire in her eyes. The guilt was still there, but now it had a companion, purpose. "This is our first real clue. This mask is the key." Landry sighed, running a hand over his face. "Chloe, this was 12 years ago. In the middle of Mardi Gras, there are thousands of masks in this city. Tracing one from a kid's drawing, it's a long shot." "It's the only shot we have," she insisted, her voice firm. "I'm not letting this go." Chloe knew the police had limited resources for a case this cold. If the mask was going to be found, she would have to be the one to find it. She took a high-resolution photo of the drawing with her phone. That night, she didn't sleep. She spent hours online, searching for Mardi Gras masks, Plague Doctor, Artisan Masks, New Orleans. The search yielded thousands of images, but none matched the intricate design in Noah's drawing. The next day, she took a day off work. She started visiting the mask shops in the French Quarter, the ones that sold cheap, mass-produced souvenirs. The shopkeepers all shook their heads. She moved on to the more artistic galleries, the ones that catered to serious collectors. Still, nothing. By the end of the day, she was discouraged, but not defeated. There had to be someone who knew this style. Her break came a few days later. She was showing the picture to the owner of a small, dusty costume shop, a place that had been there for generations. The owner squinted at the photo and shook his head, but an elderly man sitting in a corner, repairing a feathered headdress, overheard them. He motioned for her to come closer. "Let me see that, Cher," he said, his voice a thick Cajun accent. His name was Antoine, and his hands, though wrinkled, were steady and precise. He studied the image for a long time. "This is not a common design. This is old work, specific work." He tapped a finger on the phone's screen. "This filigree here, This is the mark of a private crew. They commission their own designs, very exclusive. They do not buy from shops like this. Chloe's heart began to beat faster. A crew? Which one? Antoine squinted again, thinking. It is hard to say, but this style, dark, somber, it reminds me of the crew of Somnus, the crew of Sleep. Very old, very secretive, full of the city's old money. They don't talk much about their business. The crew of Somnus. It was a name, a lead. She thanked Antoine profusely and immediately started digging. He was right. They were incredibly private. Their website was a single page with an emblem and a contact email that was never answered. Their membership was not public. She hit another wall. She updated Detective Landry, who promised to look into it, but warned her that without more evidence, he couldn't get a warrant for their records. Chloe refused to be stopped. If she couldn't get the official list, she would find it another way. She went to the public library, digging into the archives, looking at society pages and newspaper articles from the 2012 Mardi Gras season. She searched for any mention of the crew of Somnus. For days, she found nothing but passing references to their annual ball. Then she found it. A small, grainy photo in an online gallery from a local newspaper. The caption read, "Members of the crew of Somnus ride their float, a dream of Morpheus, down St. Charles Avenue." Her breath caught. The float was dark and elaborate, and on it were a dozen figures in cloaks and masks. She zoomed in, the image pixelating. Her eyes scanned the masked faces, and then she saw him. In the center of the float stood a tall man, wearing the exact mask from Noah's drawing. The long beak, the hollow eyes, the intricate patterns. It was a perfect match. In his hand, he held a distinctive scepter, topped with a carved black raven. This was it. This was the man who took her brother. She now had a picture, but still no name. She knew she couldn't go to the police with just a grainy photo. She needed to identify him. She thought of Antoine, the mask maker. Maybe he recognized more than just the mask. She went back to his shop, her hands shaking as she showed him the newspaper photo. He peered at it closely, his eyes widening slightly. He didn't recognize the man's face, which was hidden, but he recognized his work. "The scepter," he whispered, pointing a frail finger at the screen. "I made that. A custom piece. It was a very specific commission, for a very particular client." He looked up at Chloe, his eyes sad. A wealthy man from the Garden District. He and his wife, they were good people, but they carried a great sadness. They couldn't have children. "What's his name?" Chloe asked, her voice barely audible. Antoine hesitated for a moment, then sighed. "His name is Alistair Finch." The name echoed in the silent shop. Alistair Finch, a well-known philanthropist, a patron of the arts, a man whose name was on the side of hospital wings and museum galleries. He was a recluse, especially after his wife passed away a few years ago. A quick search on her phone confirmed everything. He was a prominent member of the crew of Somnus, and an article from 2011 mentioned his and his wife's long and painful struggle with infertility. A motive, however twisted, began to form in Chloe's mind. A man who desperately wanted a child, a chaotic parade, a little boy who let go of his sister's hand for just a second. It all clicked into place with horrifying clarity. Chloe took everything she had, the drawing, the photo of the float, the name. to Detective Landry. He listened intently, his skepticism slowly melting away as he looked at the evidence she had gathered. It was circumstantial, he warned her, but it was more than enough for him to act. He couldn't get a search warrant, not yet, but he could do a knock and talk, a friendly visit to Mr. Alistair Finch. "I need to be there," Chloe said. "Please, not in the house, in the car. I just need to see him." Landry looked at her, saw the 12 years of pain and determination in her eyes, and nodded. The next afternoon, they drove to the Garden District. The houses were old, grand mansions, hidden behind iron gates and ancient oak trees. Finch's home was one of the largest, a white-columned estate set far back from the street. Chloe's stomach was in knots. She sat in the passenger seat of the unmarked car while Landry walked up the long brick path and knocked on the heavy wooden door. The door was answered by Alistair Finch himself. He was older now, thinner, with gray hair and a tired, scholarly face. He looked like a grieving widower, not a monster. From the car, Chloe could see them talking. Finch was calm, polite, gesturing as he spoke. Landry was professional. It looked like a dead end. Her heart sank. Maybe she was wrong. Landry was starting to walk back down the path when the front door opened again. A young man stepped out onto the porch. He looked about 19. He was tall, with dark, wavy hair and a friendly smile. He said something to Finch, who put a hand on his shoulder, and Chloe stopped breathing. It was him. She knew it instantly. The shape of his face, the way he stood. He had their father's eyes. He had their mother's smile. It was Noah. Forgetting all of Landry's instructions, Chloe threw open the car door. She stumbled out, her legs weak. "Noah!" she called out, her voice a raw cry. The young man on the porch turned his head, his brow furrowed in confusion. Finch's calm demeanor shattered. His face turned pale with panic, and he grabbed the boy's arm, trying to pull him back inside. "Julian, get in the house!" Finch hissed. But Chloe was already walking toward them, tears streaming down her face. "Noah, it's me. It's Chloe." The boy, Julian, looked at her, then back at Finch, his face a mask of confusion. "Who's Noah?" he asked. The confrontation shattered the quiet afternoon. Landry was calling for backup on his radio. Finch, cornered, began to ramble, his sophisticated facade crumbling to reveal the desperate man beneath. "I gave him a better life," he shouted, his voice cracking. "I saved him, from the noise, from the crowds. He was special. I knew it the moment I saw him. We gave him everything." It wasn't a confession of malice, but of a love so twisted and selfish it had become monstrous. The police arrived in minutes. Alistair Finch was taken into custody, and the young man who had been called Julian for 12 years was led to a police car, looking back at the woman on the lawn, a stranger who was calling him by a name he didn't recognize, a name that somehow felt like a distant, forgotten dream. The reunion was not a storybook ending. The weeks that followed were a painful, complicated process. Noah had no memory of his early childhood, of his real name, of his family. His entire world had been built by Finch. Chloe and her parents had to reintroduce themselves to their own son, their own brother. The joy of finding him was tangled with the sorrow of all they had lost. Chloe's guilt finally lifted, but it was replaced by a new, heavy responsibility. She became Noah's bridge back to his past, spending hours with him, patiently showing him old photos, telling him stories of a life he couldn't remember. It was slow, frustrating work. Sometimes he would get a flash, a flicker of a memory, the taste of his mother's gumbo, the feel of their old dog's fur. But mostly, he was a stranger in his own family. Their family was whole again, but the pieces didn't fit like they used to. They were jagged and broken, reshaped by years of trauma. But as they sat together in the quiet of their living room, looking through old albums, Chloe felt a sense of peace. The ghost of Mardi Gras was finally gone. The silence in their home was no longer filled with unspoken blame, but with the tentative, hopeful sounds of a family learning to be whole again. Alistair Finch believed he was saving Noah, not kidnapping him. It brings up a difficult question. Can a person's good intentions ever justify such a terrible act? I'm really curious to hear your take on this in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please consider sharing it with someone who appreciates tales of mystery and resilience. Your support helps bring these incredible stories to light. Thank you for listening.